Hey, good man.
Good, man. I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's always hard with this time difference.
Oh, no, no problem. Wait, is it getting louder now when I'm closer here, or is it kind of the
Yeah,
same?
much close, much better closer. I think mine's a little. I have kind of a shitty mic
Okay,
too.
yeah. I just want to make sure that, because can you hear my dog doing bullshit in the background?
Nah.
Okay, good. Yeah, he's a piece of work. He's been really naughty recently, so
Is he still a puppy or is he now out of the puppy phase?
he's I think he's 8 or 9 months, so he's like a naughty teenager basically
Yeah,
who's
so he should know better now.
he should know better, but like he has to push the limits and he'll do something bad and then like look at us. Like, so is this okay? Like you punish me once, but like not consistently enough. It's our first dog, so it's like a little bit tough to know how to do things.
Are most of the dogs out there like the little tiny cute ones? I had one Chinese client who, where I live, I have a lot of clients that go back and forth, and she had one of those giant Tibetan Mastiffs. But other than that, I feel like most of the dogs are cute little tiny things.
I see a pretty good mix. Yeah, I see some like huskies, which I think it's too hot in the summer here to
Yeah.
have a husky like a little bit
Just
too
walk around with
big.
a husky in like megatropolis China, like some big city of some
Yeah,
point.
just you could see the poor animal is just out of its element, literally, and just is not happy. But I think it's like a status thing because they're probably more expensive. But yeah,
Yeah.
we just have a little dog. I mean, our apartment is not huge, so I think having a big dog would just be a little bit claustrophobic, you know?
Yeah. Do you take them out? Like what's your daily? Like what is your daily life in China as a fitness influencer?
Yeah, it's a little bit weird right now because it's still like the end of Chinese New Year.
Yeah, I
So
saw you went on a trip, right?
yeah, so I went back to my wife's hometown, which like really disrupts things. I
Yeah,
didn't
well,
go to,
everything shuts down. Like China's different than us, right? Like every for like 2 weeks, right? Or how long is it?
I mean, like the big stuff will be open, like the supermarkets, but most family stores and gyms and those kinds of stuff will all close, especially in Shenzhen,
Yeah.
because most people go back to their hometown. And so it's almost like a ghost town. There's like no people here. It's pretty wild.
The first time
And
I
then it's
realized
still,
Chinese New Year's was like a big deal was when I started steroids because it's like there's like 2 3 weeks where just nothing, you can't get anything because everything comes from China. It's like where all the
oh,
raws
right,
are. And so there's like
right.
everything shuts down for like a month. No one ships anything. So everyone knows get your shit like early January, end of December, and then we wait till
And it's different
March.
every year. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
different. It changes, so you can't like
It
actually
changes every year.
market.
I'm so clueless. Like what is it based off of? I thought it was the
Uh,
same time every year.
yeah, so no, it's based off. Sometimes it's late January.
It
Sometimes
seems
it's
like
like
it's
more
always around the same time-ish, right? It's never like
yeah, yeah.
September or
It
something, is
changes by
it?
like maybe 10 or 15 days. So it's
Okay, yeah.
not like a dramatic shift or anything. But it does disrupt things for me quite a lot in terms of like the gym. Actually, I went to the gym a couple times back in my wife's hometown. Her friend, I mean, she basically set us up on like a play date. Like he likes the gym as well. I'm like, oh, me like gym. Oh yeah. And so yeah,
That's all
we
it
we
takes.
went there and it was actually a really nice gym as well with a pendulum squad and like all
Oh
kinds of cool
man.
machines. And so it was I wouldn't say it was super productive because when you go to a new gym, it's like a little bit tough to have like the same quality of workout, but it was fun. And then it's kind of my one time a year where I detrain a little bit and
Yeah.
like get a little bit out of shape because I'm usually hitting it pretty hard most of the year. And so it was tough the first few times I did it, but now it's like I know it comes back somewhat quickly. And even if it doesn't come back somewhat quickly, like, in a month I'll be right back where I was. So
So like a
um
10-day period, or like when you say you kind of deload a little bit, like you're just taking a little easy in the gym, taking a couple of days off, or I mean, I guess you probably never like take it super easy in the gym, right? Like how
it
do you
was
structure this?
well, it was like 2 weeks off the
Like
gym. Like I
totally
didn't
off?
yeah, yeah. So I didn't there were those two workouts in the very beginning, but after that it was like a week and a half to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go a month off of the gym. I think that's where you start to have like muscle loss and like a lot of deconditioning, and that's where it takes like a much longer time to get back. That was Mike Israel's recommendation.
Yeah.
Maybe because enhanced guys can like regain the muscle more quickly or something, or maybe when they're on like cruising on TRT or something, they don't lose as much. But yeah, I found that even in 2 weeks, my performance is down like 10% maybe on a lot of
As,
movements.
as far as like max weight or more like second set, getting the same amount of reps kind of thing.
Max weight, yeah. So my conditioning is still pretty good. Like my endurance has never ever been an issue in the gym, but like the heavier stuff will feel even heavier. Like I was setting up with the 40 kilo dumbbells, 88 pounds, and usually I'm like 100 or 110, and they felt just heavy in my hands.
Yeah.
Like they just you pick it up and you're like, that's not supposed to feel that way. I think the central nervous system kind of just down regulates because it's just not needed. And so the first few sessions back and just stabilizing in the shoulder girdle and everything, like I've had some issues there anyway, as you know. And so it felt even worse than usual, just like stabilizing everything and keeping everything sort of moving the way I want it to move. And so but it's also only once a year, so it's long term not a huge issue.
That's funny. That's kind of how it feels when you're on gear and you get off. A lot of times your strength doesn't go down like dramatically. It'll go down a little bit, but just when you set it, you're like, what the fuck? This doesn't feel like it's about to spring load up. It feels like I gotta like mentally think about this and get myself in a position to do this before. It's like not a lot more weight, but it's just everything's easier and you almost like the pain, the work more.
Yeah, I heard someone say, I think it was Huberman. He said something like testosterone makes effort feel good or
Yeah, I would
work
say that it
good.
also makes it like easier, but it does make it feel
Yeah.
feel better too. Yeah, for sure.
Because yeah, one of the comments that I got was which was kind of wild. Someone's like, "There's no way this guy's natural. Look how hard he trains," and like maybe there's something to that, right? Like it's kind of a ridiculous statement to read when you're natural. Like he thinks I like because of this, not the
You would think
physique.
it
Like
should be the opposite, right? If you're all jacked, not doing shit, then you'd be like, this guy's definitely on gear.
yeah, like I think if you get to a certain level, no matter what, people are gonna find some reason that you're on gear, right? Like if you look a certain way at a certain point. It's almost like they based on the picture or video, they assume you're not natural, and then they try to find like reasons to support it. And it could even be, yeah, like, oh, you do too much volume, you do too little volume, like you work
Exactly.
too hard, you don't work hard enough. And so it's like no matter what you do, they're gonna find something, some reason to support it. Yeah.
The one that I heard about you is that you're tall, so you're definitely on gear because you got muscle and you're natty and you're taller. So-
Actually, I've had people assume they're like, "Are you 5'5" or 5'6"? I'm like, "I'm 6 feet. What the fuck?"
Well, as a
And they just,
natty, that makes sense.
yeah, no, I think they assume if they see someone climbing natural and they're jacked, they assume that they're short, basically,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
is
I think you can take some
wild.
really good pictures in the goon light and stuff, and you're good with angles, but it's like I think if you're going to judge somebody, a good way to judge might be looking at their shittiest pictures too, because it's like, I mean, if you find my shittiest picture, like no matter what, there's going to be some roundness, there's going to be some stuff there. Like, I'm sure you could
Yeah,
find some pictures of you where you could make yourself look like you barely have been
flat.
working out for, yeah, yeah, if you get the right right time of the day and the right
It
lighting.
was wild. Actually, Alberto Nunez, who I really enjoyed your interview with him.
Oh,
That
thanks.
was a banger. He said he'll see a physique and he'll see a video, and then they'll turn and he'll see like one angle where he's like, yep, you're natty. They're just like a
Yeah.
little bit of flatness where it doesn't look like the muscle is just stuffed full of glycogen or something. And I'll kind of assess the same. Like there are some guys there, it just they look too good to be natural. Like you could just tell like everywhere is filled out, and you're like, especially if they're like 19 years old or some shit, you're like, okay, this
Yeah.
is not like what the fuck?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's funny. I was wondering about going back to China real quick. It's kind of funny that you don't have like a lot to compare it to as far as the gym culture in the US since you kind of started bodybuilding basically in China, which is kind
Yeah.
of it's kind of funny that you start your whole journey there. I was wondering, like, do you think there are some benefits to you starting later at 25? I think a lot of us fall into certain traps when we're young.
Yeah, so yeah, that's something I've thought about. And I think part of it if I had started lifting at 15 years old rather than running at 15 years old, I would be bigger. I think that if I had 10 years of lifting rather than running, I would be more developed. But also think that wasn't time totally wasted, right? Like I was developing my cardiovascular system. I mean, even if I do like a set of 15 or 20 or even 25 and 30 on the squat or on an RDL, like a big movement, cardio is never the limiting factor. Like never, like just, I mean, my heart rate will get up to like 150 to 160 after, and I'll be breathing a little bit hard. Like if you're doing, 3 plates for 20 or something on an RDL, like there's just no way to do that without you're doing work, right? So there's going
Yeah.
to be some elevation for sure. Um, but it's never to the point where that's the limiting factor, right? And even when bulked up, I'll read other guys who say stuff like, yeah, when I was really bulked up and I got up to 230, I was just constantly out of breath. I felt fine at 230. Like I was just, stairs or walking around or even like going for a short run. It's harder on the joints. That's one thing I've noticed when you're heavier, like running is just not as enjoyable because I'm carrying around this 80-pound muscle and fat suit compared to when I was a runner, right? So like that's gonna have an effect. I do think that there are benefits on a mental side of things where you do a lot of dumb shit when you're like 21, 22 years old, right? You just don't have the same judgment. Like you're a little bit more impulsive, a little bit more aggressive, or just you want it right now. And this is where actually most guys who hop on steroids, they're fairly young from what I've seen. Like I've read some studies and just talking to people, it's typically like early 20s
Yeah.
to maybe late teens, somewhere in there. And there are guys who wait a longer time, and I think that's the way to go. Um, but as for lifting in general, yeah, maybe just better judgment overall. And I think with content creation as well. Like you see some younger content creators where they're very ambitious, they're clearly very driven, extremely hardworking, but maybe they don't have the wisdom, right? As I have a few gray hairs in my beard now, right?
I
As do
got
you,
tons.
right?
I got a lot more
Yeah.
than you probably.
And each one of those is like, oh, something you fucked up, right? It's just some situation that maybe you were a little bit too impulsive or you just wanted something to happen faster than it should and just like you learn from that experience. Whereas if you're 20 years old, maybe you don't quite have that judgment. And so yeah, I see some younger content creators where I know in 10 years they will look back at some of the stuff they've done now and
I've
they're
done
just going
that.
to think, uh, I shouldn't have done that, or I regret that. And maybe they won't admit it in public, but they'll probably know that, hey, maybe I shouldn't have used that study at 35% body fat, or whatever it is. Hypothetical, it's just a random situation.
And
Um,
they're
so
so
I try not to.
confidently incorrect a lot of times,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. Like, and then they'll double down and double down. Actually, ironically, Mike Israetel has this mindset, but he's a little bit older. So, some people don't really quite get the wisdom at any point. And I'm not saying I'm some kind of wise old man with a beard down to his knees or anything like that. But I certainly have learned a lot. And sometimes just taking a minute before a set. I mean, I've had times where I loaded up a weight and then I took a plate or two, like a little bit off. I took,
Yeah.
10 or 20 pounds off because I was like, that warm up didn't quite feel the way it should have, right? And I think you have to mess yourself up once or twice before you realize like, okay, maybe the weight I want to lift is not quite there on the day, right? And to anyone listening to this, if someone else sees you take weight off the bar, they don't give a shit. Like they
Yeah.
really don't care. Like, you
Especially
might
when you're
think, oh no, I
jacked.
gotta, yeah, like, oh, I gotta impress these people. They don't give a shit about you. Like they
Yeah.
just, like that's when I was in high school, I'd be like, okay, everyone's, people are judging me. No, people don't really care. And actually, if most people see someone take weight off the bar, they put it there and then they kind of ponder and think about it and take weight off. Most people are thinking, huh, like that's a guy who knows his limits or is like
Yeah.
is in touch with his body. They're not thinking like what a pussy, that kind of thing,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's all just self-talk, right? That's not what other people think about
Yeah.
you. That's just what you think other people are thinking about you. And so I would say, yeah, that kind of wisdom just from experience. And I think I wouldn't say that kind of stuff is like the key to muscle growth, but injuring yourself does definitely suck. And I've had a few even recently, where it happens and then you're kind of like, okay, yeah, that was a bad decision, right? The
Yeah.
calf thing was a little bit like, okay, well, there was no way to see that coming. I was doing like a 25 or a 30 rep max on calves, and I was probably like 15 reps away from failure, and my calf just like it was such a weird thing.
You tore it or
Um,
what?
I'm not 100% sure. Someone's like, "Aren't you on the way to the hospital, like to get an MRI?" I'm like, "I don't, guys. I can."
Yeah, what are they gonna
Nah,
do unless you need to reattach it? You'll know that real
exactly. Like
quick.
they just,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I couldn't walk properly for a few days.
Do you have bruising?
Um, Not much. There was bruising in the foot.
Huh.
A few days, actually, like 7 or 8 days later.
It might have
The
just
arch of my
drained down
foot.
there.
Exactly. Like it takes a while. So I think it was probably my posterior tibialis. Like
Yeah.
the anterior tibialis, it elevates, dorsiflexes your foot. I guess there's one that does
Uh,
the opposite, and I have like that leg length imbalance and some instabilities in the hips, so maybe that was it. But yeah, it was just like a bullet gunshot to the. I mean, it made this wild noise as well,
oh,
and
oh
so
shit.
it was yeah, it was,
How long ago
and it
was
was
that
so
now?
unexpected. Was that?
How long ago was that now?
Oh man, that must have been like 3 months.
And
So,
so you're
and
still dealing with
I
it?
no, 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 it seems okay now. I mean, I hit a squat PR for high reps a week later,
Oh,
so it
I don't know
wasn't.
if that's the
Yeah.
best.
Yeah, so someone's like, aren't you on the way to hospital? I'm like, nah, I'm already thinking about my next PR. And so I have zero surgeries on my record. So I think the only things that really would terrify me would be like a biceps tear or a pec tear.
Yeah.
Um, like those are the only two things. But most injuries heal themselves, and so I probably won't be doing any one rep max preacher curls or one rep max power flies or anything like that.
You,
Um,
you got good biofeedback. Like we talked about last time, the guy who tore his pec doing the incline with Larry Wills can see you getting that kind of ego or like ignoring the signals from your body that lead to that.
yeah, and the thing is, there was like a whole line of red flags
Yeah,
going toward,
exactly.
like there was clear instability. Like I thought I have it bad.
Once you start
He had
turning,
hip
it's game over.
injury.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like it was shifting around, and I'm actually almost surprised it didn't tear. I think he did an 8 rep max with 4 plates or something like that right before, and I'm almost astonished that didn't tear it. I mean, obviously the gear um, does seem to do. Do you think actually the gear maybe cuts you off from that biofeedback to a certain extent?
Personally, not for me, but I could see why that could happen to some people for sure. Like, yeah, I'm pretty hyper aware. Like I do things I would never recommend other people to do. Like I'm in my head when I train, a lot of times and I do it in a way where it doesn't affect my intensity or it's kind of almost subconscious. But I
Right.
do think for some people they definitely even if they do feel they just ignore it because they feel invincible regardless. They just feel like, oh, even if it's a little off, like fuck it, I'm just a beast right now.
So do you think it's more like the aggression and the mental side of things? Because because you hear story like I've watched more plays, more dates videos and such, and like stories about people on gear. And I wouldn't say I'm tempted, um, but I do find it kind of curious, like the mental side of things. I know Pete Rubish has also talked about like how Anavar would really increase his strength and how it
Oh,
would
I heard him just talk about Trent all the time. I didn't hear him talk about Anavar.
yeah, he did. I mean, he did a video on it, and props to him for the
I, I
transparency and
I
stuff.
love I love Pete. Yeah, his stuff is good.
Oh, he's fantastic. Yeah, watching his arc has been um almost like gratifying in a way. I don't know, like because I've followed him for so long. And seeing him running and like still hitting big numbers, even totally off anything, has been
And the mental
super
stuff he
interesting.
talks about too, like he was a fucking freak. I mean, he was pulling crazy numbers. I can't
Yeah,
imagine
well,
what that would feel
snacks,
like. Yeah.
his snack ratings, yeah, like all of his stuff is fantastic. Yeah, yeah, for
Like,
sure.
so man, we touched on a few things. There's a lot I want to talk about. Let's go back to your deload a little bit. That was one of the questions we had. I'll kind of put it here a little earlier. So are you working out 7 days a week? That's what they were saying.
Not usually. I take my rest days by feel. So my typical split is legs day one, then day two, sort of chest and back, occasionally overhead pressing. Depends on, what I want to focus on. And then day three is biceps and triceps, often delt isolation. I personally have no problem pressing one day and then doing like laterals or rear delts the
Yeah,
day after. To me, that's totally fine. I,
yeah,
I wouldn't really press 2 days in a row, and I wouldn't really do, cable laterals 2 days in a row, most likely. But like something about pressing one day and then isolation the next day feels fantastic to me. So I have no issues with that. I've gotten comments like, "Did you train your delts 2 days in a row?" I'm like, "Yeah, but it's a side delt. Like, really? I
yeah.
mean, how does he recover? It's the side delt. Like, come on." And
Exactly.
then, rear delts also fairly high frequency. So legs, chest and back, and then that third day is kind of like I call it a bro day. So it's basically a little bit more intuitive, but it's always biceps and triceps and always some delt isolation, maybe some face pulls, but it's mostly just easy shit. Just
Yeah,
easy. I mean, it's hard. It's challenging, and I'm pushing really hard, but it's not super taxing stuff
yeah,
compared to a deadlift or a squat or a bench or something like that. I might do some neck work, some forearms, just maybe some abs, that kind of stuff. And then I just keep going through that rotation, and then I take a day off when I feel like I need a day off. Right now, I probably won't need a day off. I mean, I might go 7 days in a row
yeah,
because I took 2 weeks. I just took 2 weeks off,
yeah.
right? So I'm feeling fresh. I'm feeling motivated. I mean, I'm getting sore from the training, but I don't really even get all that sore anyway. Like I'm a little bit sore and it's nice because it's
Yeah,
it's a nice change of pace for me because I don't typically get all that sore. And I have no issues working out when sore, right? Like if my chest is a little bit sore still from the previous session and I go in and train chest, often I can feel it better,
yeah,
right? And I sometimes I have to lighten the weight a little bit. And if you're totally trashed, I wouldn't, just take a little bit longer. But I think if you're slightly to mildly sore, that can actually help you to have better technique in a lot of ways, right?
yeah,
Like some people have never had sore lats. I would say for the first like 5 years of my training, probably never had sore lats.
yeah.
Like I
Decade for
just
me, probably.
yeah, like that piece of muscle just didn't do anything.
Yeah,
It was all I always like rear delts or some traps or long head of the triceps kicking in on like a pull over kind of thing or maybe just biceps. I mean, if you looked at my pull-ups were like this, like really shrugged up and like I mean, it was basically like a hammer curl, right? I'll probably do a whole video responding to Dr. Mike on that. I think if you do your pull-ups shittily enough, yeah, it is like a compound hammer curl if you do a neutral
yeah,
grip, right? Like, but it means you're doing the movement in a way that kind of defeats the purpose of
yeah,
doing
exactly.
it, right? So it's like the more activation in the muscle groups that you would never ever use that, exercise for, it means you're just not working out very productively.
Yeah,
So yeah, you can fuck up a movement enough to say you don't need another movement, right? But like that doesn't mean you're like some kind of big brained alpha Chad who knows what he's doing. No, it means you're fucking it up, right? And so I've actually had to change a lot of my movement patterns where, as you said, if I'm doing a pull down now, I'm actually crunched forward. Like I have sore abs right now because I have to keep really crunched forward because my instinct is to pull with, the Mike Israetel special where I'm
yeah,
really arched back. I'm getting like lower traps and, pinching back. but that doesn't do anything for my lats.
Yeah.
Like very close to nothing. I mean, maybe a little bit at the very top, but even the stretch at the top is like in the scapula when you're doing it in that style. And so, I've had to really keep the elbows forward and just driving them down and not overextend. And actually, the range of motion is not as much as like I used to watch some IFBB pros do their pull downs, and I'd say, oh, they're half repping it. Well, no, they were actually just finishing
Yeah.
where the lat finished rather than either crunching down or like retracting, right? But they were actually finishing. Their form was actually a lot better than mine.
And that
So I
was
was like, oh,
intuitive. That wasn't because a partial LinkedIn study or something made them decide to
yeah,
do their
no,
training that way.
and if you, I mean, a lot of the most developed guys, I think people just go to genetics, right? Oh, like, oh, he's a freak. He's genetic. Well, but if you look at how they move, maybe they were just very intuitive, as you said, with how they moved. And then there's actually a really good comment on your video. One
Yeah.
guy was like, oh, people hop to genetics, but actually a lot of it is probably just, oh, they found out a way to activate and stimulate an area really well. And then it grew, and then it kept growing, and they sort of saw it growing and they got motivated, so they trained it more. And so it just kind of that's me and my triceps basically, where they take over a lot of movement. And it's kind of a problem because when you're doing some adjacent movements to it, now you have to find out a way to shut that shit down, right?
Right.
Like it got
Yeah.
so big it started taking over. And so yeah, I've had to kind of concentrate on like feeling a lat contraction and feeling a lat stretch, and then actually making sure that those are the limiting factor. Because if I don't focus, I'll use something else, right? Either biceps or triceps or traps or rear delts. There's so much muscle that can do this,
Yeah.
right? And so you really have to keep everything well aligned. And this is where when people are like, "Oh, you're never going to gain muscle after 5 years of lifting," keep in mind, I had already written a book about lifting at year 5 and was getting into the fitness industry and was like the go-to guy for the whole circle of friends about lifting. And even in that situation, I was actually still intermediate.
Yeah.
So I think there are very few actually advanced lifters in the gym, right? We might
Oh,
think,
yeah.
oh, like 30% beginner, 40% intermediate, 30% advanced. No, it's probably like 1 or 2% advanced, right? Even the guy who you look at and think, oh, he's definitely advanced, in that case, could be genetics, could be gear, right? Like you do see some people train, and it's clear they don't know what they're doing, and a lot of it is the anabolics, because they will grow you, but yeah, maybe the quality of the muscle is, they have lagging areas, right? And so yeah, it's been a process, and it's something where I can't have any lazy sessions.
Yeah.
I can't have any sessions where I'm kind of like, oh, I just go in because I won't get what I want out of that workout.
You lowered your volume a little bit recently, right?
Yeah, I mean, the past couple of days have been higher just because I've been so excited to be back in the gym. And like, I think almost when you're coming back, maybe you can. So there's kind of two schools of thought where maybe don't do that much at first because you want to ease back into it and like gain momentum, and like that kind of makes sense. But I also am thinking, okay, well, I'm lifting a little bit less weight, and I actually kind of want more touches on the bar to feel things out. And so my volume has been a little bit higher, but overall, yeah, I've lowered it from where it was in like 2021, 2022.
What was your highest volume? You were doing some really, really high volume at one point, weren't you?
Oh yeah, like some muscle groups were like 30, like 25, 30 sets
Per
per
week?
week. And
Where are you at
back
now, you
back
think?
as a whole was,
Besides this week?
where am I now? I would say, so I did a video on how I lowered my volume, and a lot of people were like, oh, he's high intensity training now. It's like, no, that's not, no, no, that's not what I said. I lowered, not like I only do one set a week
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
And so I would say I'm mostly in the 10 to 15 set range for a lot of muscle groups. Um,
So about half of your peak volume when you were doing
yeah,
the
I would say
most.
about half. Um, and I would also say that I kind of take a little bit more nuanced approach to the biomechanics side of things. You know, when you're a beginner, you can kind of just count like sets for back. But, when you're advanced, you kind of have to break it down and be a little bit more targeted, right? Like, I'm not quite at the point of like iliac lats or like different parts of the lats. Like, I love Cass and he's great, but I don't, and maybe you've had some disagreements, but I'm not quite at the point of like breaking it down to various parts or like, I'll do some upper chest and mid chest and like lower chest, but I do have to be a little bit more targeted with my exercise selection as well as how I move. And so I actually haven't, the way I think is not like, oh, I want to do 12 sets for chest. Like if someone does that, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. But I also think that's almost like reverse engineering something. And so I'll kind of just set a baseline of work with exercises that I want to do performed in the right way. And then I'll adjust things almost on a session by session basis. So if I feel good, I'll do a little bit more, and then I'll just auto regulate, right? So I'll do a little bit less, either if I don't feel as good, or if the sets themselves I really think I nailed. Like you ever do a set of RDLs and you're just like, okay, yeah, that's good. Like
Yeah.
I'm done. Like that's that, there's no need for a second set. And you can kind of just feel that, right? Like you have this feeling like the muscle, it's been worked. And yeah, you don't need a second set. But on something like a face pull or some other small movement, I often need more than one set. I often need more than two sets. And so I would say 2 to 3 sets per exercise is kind of like my baseline. But yeah, if I'm feeling good and motivated, sometimes I'll still go to 4 sets. It's just a lot less than I used to. I used to be like 5 sets, 6 sets, but like just going and going and going. But it's not any better for progression in a lot of cases because you're tired. I know the research is like all the volume is better, but like I really do think that when you get to a certain point, you just can't recover from more, especially as you're really close to failure and the effort is really high and you're actually targeting the areas that you want to target. And so, yeah, I have dropped things down mostly out of necessity, just because I was not recovering and not progressing. And then when I dropped things down, I was able to do that, and the quality of the set was just as good, if not better.
Yeah, I mean, as I've gotten more advanced, I've ended up lowering volume, right? Like I think you've talked about, you just get so efficient at movement sometimes. It's like I can't do fucking 30 or 40 fucking sets per week. I will not recover for like 2 or 3 weeks. And I've been able to narrow down like almost to like a lower volume that I'm like, I don't really want to go that low. Oh, real quick,
Yeah.
one thing I want to say too, when you're about the RDL, something that I'll do sometimes, like I'll do that, I'll hit that top end set and I'm like, fuck, okay, that's all I got. And then I'll be like, I do want to get that movement archetype one more time, and I might go to like a hyper extension and load that up a little bit, because like you say, we can kind of feel. You can feel where like sometimes it's like maybe my CNS system doesn't have it in me, but maybe like my hamstrings got a little bit more. So that's a good option for that, I was thinking.
And I think Bugenhagen has talked about how sometimes a certain deadlift won't be there on the day. And I'm pretty sure Atlas Power Shrug just talked about this as well. Sometimes a certain style of deadlift won't be there on the day, but then you'll switch the movement pattern and hit a PR. And it's
Yeah.
just like the strength was there, but I think moving in the exact same way, the body almost like rejects it, right? Like, oh, you just did RDLs. I want something new. I want something different. And yeah, I think this is where doubling up sometimes is the right move, but often a little bit more movement diversity because, man, some people are just, they'll point to a study like, oh, these two movements are the same. They cause the same hypertrophy in the studies. Like, what the? Really? Like, you think they're exactly the same, right? Like, you think an RDL and a hyperextension are exactly the same. Like, oh, one is hinging like this, the other is hinging like this. No, like, they're they're very different. Like in terms of how they feel and in terms of like the recovery cost, wildly different movements, even if they're targeting very similar areas. And so this is where you'll have like a super confident beginner tell you you're stupid or something
Yeah,
for
exactly.
for me, right? Is it's and maybe they'll learn, maybe they won't learn, but it's just like that overconfidence and that because I've been there. Like I've been the guy who's like squats and front squats and like it's all the same shit. Like it doesn't matter. Like the study said it's like, well, I'm not even saying the study's wrong because on average, yeah, like you might have the same muscle growth across a study of a whole bunch of people, but that doesn't mean they're the same movement or like the outcomes are going to be the same for all people all the time. Like there is some individualization that you have to do. And this is where when you're advanced, one of the ways you can tell someone is advanced is they can explain every little part of their program. Like, I did
Yeah.
this for this reason with this technique and this rep range and this many sets. Like, every little piece, every little moving part of that puzzle, the answer is like right at their fingertips, whereas some 18-year-old corn-fed kid on SARMs,
Yeah.
like, he's in there moving. Like, his body is doing work, but like, he doesn't necessarily have the understanding of those details. And so, yeah, you can usually tell not even who's natty or not, but just like who's advanced or not. Maybe that's a good series, advanced or not, where I
Yeah, there you go.
look at an influencer, I'm like, he's an intermediate in disguise. Ha ha ha. That actually would be super entertaining. But yeah, you can usually tell just from either watching someone work out or just listening to them talk about working out. Yeah.
And there's always other considerations too, besides just ability to put on muscle with a movement. People compare these two movements like that's the only thing they're looking at when somebody's setup might have them benefit a lot more from like a specific type of lunge. I talked about this in my last video. Like maybe somebody needs to create some yielding action in their glutes. They need to be able to slow down. They're moving too forward in space. Well, like a forward lunge would be really good for them. If they're doing like a Bulgarian, then that's pushing them more forward. That's kind of opposite. And then maybe they feel that they like it, but that's creating more issues that's going to limit them down the road or limit their relative motion. So just things to take in consideration too, because everything affects us and our ability to move. Everything we do has a cost. We want to make sure that it's a cost that we can take. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I used to do German volume training on deadlifts. So 10 sets of 10, 1 minute rest. And it was just like dumb enthusiasm, basically just aggression and like excitement and enjoying doing difficult things. Um, which some people say is not natural, but like no, just like a lot of intermediates get in this trap where they just love going to the gym and working hard and pushing themselves. But at a certain point, you need more than train harder than last time, right? Like that'll work for beginners. Like beginners need that message because most of them don't know how to work hard, right? Um, but yeah, once you're an intermediate, that could be the solution, but it also could be like the worst possible thing. And I kind of got caught in that volume trap where, oh, the study says like doing more volume is better. And, you know, maybe in some cases, but at a certain
For
point,
untrained individuals, for the 40 that they chose for the study, So I think me and you are both guys who, we like science. Obviously, like a lot of what I do is very like scientific, I guess you could say, when it comes to the axial skeleton and the biomechanics. But I think we know not to put too much into the studies about hypertrophy and all the training studies. What do you think in your opinion is the biggest area of limitation when it comes to training in the actual literature?
well, the biggest one, and I know Dr. Eric Helms, who I have a lot of respect for, has talked about this. It's not necessarily telling you exactly what to do. It's not like a prescription. Most of the protocols in the exercise science literature, they're not meant for you to copy, right? Like that's something, and I know that sounds like duh, but like that's something I was trying to do. I was trying to say, oh, the study says 45 sets per week is better than 30 and better than 15. So like I'm gonna try to do that. And I did. And it was not not productive. And so I would say that's probably the biggest one. It's not it's not telling you how to train, right? It's just very, very broad brushstrokes. Now, if something is like much better in the literature, which I do keep up with, I think a lot of people just think I'm a dumb meathead. Maybe, I don't know, but that's we can't rule that out actually. Um, but I do keep up with things, and if a study comes out that says, "Hey, this movement is like dramatically better than another movement," I will take note. It doesn't mean I'm going to switch, right? I saw that study that came out and said, "Oh, preacher curls are better than incline dumbbell curls." It didn't cause me to do anything differently. I kept doing my incline curls, and then maybe 6 to 8 months later or something, maybe a year. Oh, another study comes out that says incline curls are actually better than preacher curls, and so it's like you can get this ping pong action where it's just, oh, this study, this study, this study, this study, and you're just going back and forth and back and forth. I think there was a study on incline bench pressing not being better for upper chest, and then another one was like it's better for upper chest, but not better for lower chest. So I think, and some of them are just EMG, which I don't think is really all that important. Some of the technique in the studies is like really not good. Sometimes there's no videos. Like
Yeah.
that Ruffalo study actually had videos, which I thought was fantastic, right? Like
Which one was that?
I think it was the leg press one where they were comparing 0 reps in reserve and 2 reps in reserve.
Okay,
So
that's good. Yeah,
that's
definitely need video for that.
yeah, and but most studies won't have that. It's
Yeah.
kind of like a new the fact that it had videos was like, oh, like that's actually a thing. And you didn't hear a peep from me because those 2 reps in reserve sets were actually pretty
Yeah,
darn
there
challenging.
weren't
Like
mics to reps in reserve.
no, like I don't think he's ever done well, he's never done a 2 rep reserve
He
set.
thinks they're
But
two. They're really 20.
yeah, but they were legit sets. And so I wasn't that surprised that 0 and 2 reps in reserve were roughly equivalent because it was actually 2 reps in reserve. And so I'm not like a always go to failure kind of guy. Like 2 reps in reserve, if it's a high effort, if it's with the right technique. By the way, they had good technique as well. Like they were actually very well coached, I assume. Whereas some other studies, the technique is just wildly different from person to person, or you have no idea if they're actually pushing themselves. Every study is going to have like a different. I mean, if you have some kind of militaristic drill sergeant in there, like just yelling at people, okay, maybe those people will train a little bit harder than if someone's like, just stop whatever you want. Like it's a squat, they're just volitional. Just when you fail volitionally, just rack the bar, just rack the bar. Oh, you just started. Oh, rack the bar. Just no, 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 just no. Like I saw you had a little bit of hip shift. Just no, no, rack. Like you moved a millimeter. No, just rack. And so, yeah, I think I am critical of exercise science, but I think these are very reasonable criticisms. And it is getting better overall, but I'm not sure if it'll ever get to the point where someone should read a study and it should really impact their programming a lot. Right? I
Yeah.
think if that's the
At this
case,
point,
yeah, it's just, and it's mostly beginners who are like, this study said this, I'm gonna copy it. Most advanced guys are like, oh, that's cool, or like that's bullshit, but they don't actually change their training much at all, right? Like if they're a science nerd, they're like, oh, that's cool. Maybe I'll try it a little bit at some point. And if they're kind of more of a bro, they're like, oh, fucking nerds, like blah blah blah. But it doesn't, for me, it's just super general information. It's like the backdrop behind everything. And even then, it's not a backdrop that I mean, if a study came out tomorrow and said like 80 sets a week, like that's the new number, I would not, I might make some memes about it, but I'm not gonna actually do that. Just because if something like say 10 to 15 is working well for you and you've been up to like 40, 45. I mean, I've had some muscle groups up at like 50.
jeez.
Um, you know, if you've noticed moderation is good, high was not as good. Is ultra high like going to be the thing? Probably not. I mean, maybe through certain phases, maybe like a specialization thing, but even then, the levers that I pull right now in my training are more the technique side of things and then the effort side of things. And just being very accurate, very precise, and just high quality effort. And yeah, you just can't do that much of it. Um, I saw there was a content creator, I forget, I think the analogy was throwing darts. I forget where I saw this, but he said, "Oh, you're throwing darts, and you have like a professional dart thrower person, guy. I don't know if they have a title. He can hit the bullseye every time, or almost every time. And if he misses, he's like very close. Then you compare someone who's never thrown a dart in their life. They're untrained at darts. You're going to need more darts to get the same score because you're going to miss the whole board half the
Yeah.
time, right? And if the people coaching you in darts don't know how to throw darts themselves, which seems to happen quite often, well, you're going to have a pretty bad result and you're going to need a whole pile of darts to even hit the board. And so as you get better at throwing darts, maybe you don't need as many darts. Now, some people need more darts than others. And I would say, on the whole, I am someone who needs more darts. I need more sets than the average person, right? Even so, that I lowered it, I'm just a workhorse type where I'm quite resilient. I can handle a lot, certainly not infinite. I've been to where I couldn't handle anymore, but I can still handle more than the average person. And so I'm not like a high intensity training guy or anything at this point. It's just lower than it used to be. Oh, AJ Morris was the guy who had the
Oh,
dart analogy.
yeah, yeah, I don't get you. I mean, I started this whole social media stuff, YouTube, almost a year ago now, and we talked a little over 6 months ago, almost 7 months now. And I feel like even since we talked, like there's been a big kind of pushback against the evidence-based crew and the science-based approach to things.
Mhm.
Do you feel like you've noticed that as well? And what do you attribute that to if you do feel like that?
Yeah, I have definitely noticed it. And I wouldn't say I'm like happy about it, but I also understand it. And so I think a lot of content creators kind of got lumped in with each other. There are some science-based creators who are fucking amazing, who are just fantastic. Usually it's the ones who had that base of lifting and just and so they see a study and they're like, that doesn't pass the sniff test. Like that's ridiculous, right? We're like you and I, we see a study that's on untrained lifters and it just the outcome is completely the opposite of what you would expect. And it's just okay, well, that's ridiculous. Like that just I see so many studies where my first thought is like, what? That just doesn't make any sense. But you do have some content creators who take that seriously. And I think this is for a few reasons. First would be rage bait. If you want to build a following, posting controversial stuff is often, I mean, it's often productive. And so, yes, I have seen some content creators where I think a lot of what they post, you can't really fearmonger as much anymore as Athlete X used to say, like, oh, like this is going to get you hurt. This is going to like
Yeah.
every other video was like things you're doing wrong and things
Yeah.
that are dangerous to you. And it's very clickable because humans are risk averse and we don't want to mess ourselves
Yeah.
up. And so if this jacked, shirtless, shredded guy says, "Oh, never do this, never do," like you're just, oh, sure, he has whatever million followers. Like, of course, he knows what he's talking about. And so it's a very productive way, not to help people, but to build your following, right? And same thing with rage bait. Posting content that deep down you know is ridiculous but you also know other people will think it's ridiculous, that makes the algorithm go happy time. It just takes off, right? And you can see this. You can literally see this in the numbers. Squat University does it sometimes. And I'll just see someone post something ridiculous. And I think actually Menno Henselmans has been doing this a little bit. It's hard to tell someone's motivation sometimes. Like, do they actually believe it? Are they just trying to pass along information? do they know this is a ridiculous study and it's going to get a lot of engagement? So it's hard to know why someone is posting something. But if someone is consistently posting a ton of stuff that most people are pushing back against, that's almost like the definition of rage bait. And I'm not saying you have to agree with the masses, unless those masses have mass. Am I right? Hey. Uh, um, but man, I think a lot of content creators post this stuff because it just does well on social media. It does well with the advanced, bro guys who push back and they kind of send it off. And then a lot of normies read it and they're like, oh, this seems very definitive. Oh, this is because it's often that language that is not very scientific, right? Because science is supposed to be cautious. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be careful. It's supposed to be slow, right? When people are like, science is just catching up with the bros, like that's a good thing. Like that's actually kind of how it's supposed to work, right? It's supposed to be something where you have to be more certain about the information that you're putting out. And so there are some science-based content creators who are fantastic. You can look at Greg Knuckles, you look at Dr. Eric Helms, Menno is sometimes good, but again, the rage bait thing at times, I still think he's good overall. Um, but there are some, Jeff Nippard's generally pretty darn good as well. And so, there are a bunch of guys doing really good work. Then you get into the marketing side of things, where some people, you look at Ryan Humiston, he's strapping EMGs up to himself and he's speaking super definitively, like this one has more activation than this one. It's like that doesn't, what the fuck? Like that just any science-based creator looks at one of his videos and is like, just
Right.
please stop. You're giving us all a bad name. And there are a lot of people like that who they've seen this trend of science-based content and they think, oh, I want to hop on this. Like, oh, this is doing really well. So everything is like parentheses science based at the end of the video. Actually, one thing Jeff Nippard has done, and mad respect for this, he changed his messaging. He would say, oh, this is my leg workout based on science before.
Yeah, I remember
Now
that.
I think he will say, this is my leg workout based on science and experience,
Yeah.
which I think deep down is the way to go. And I think that's just more true, right? Because the base of the training is experience, right? Because going into the gym and lifting, either for yourself or people you coach or people who have also lifted who you are talking to, that is all experience. And then science is kind of like checking what might work after. And so the base is experience, right? Like there might be a little bit of science involved to tweak things, or maybe you move in this way to activate this area or something. But like the base is still experience, either personal or as a species of people. And so, yeah, I think based on science and experience, it should probably almost be experience in science, you know. But I think it's a step in the right direction. And then you have the studies getting better slowly. You have I wish more science-based creators would push back on the ones who are, because most of them are smart enough to know when other creators are kind of wiping their ass
Yeah.
with their profession, right? And so I wish there would be a little bit more self-policing here. Atlas Power Struggled again, double Atlas mention, really good channel, definitely check it out.
Yeah, I love
He
Atlas.
he's great, yeah, he's
We got a great
he's no holds
podcast.
barred,
Yeah.
yeah. And he said, "Oh, science-based creators need to police their own." And I agree because I've seen so many people misuse science, or they link a study and sometimes it has nothing to do with the topic at hand. I'm like, this doesn't, or you read the abstract and this is the exact opposite of what they're trying to use it for, and you're
Right.
like, this is not, or oh, I don't know why this came to mind, or they'll use a study talking about gaining fat cells and people with 35% body fat and a 1,250 calorie surplus, like and they're not lifting weights and they're eating low protein. And I don't know, like that just seems ridiculous. And so, yeah, I wish there was a little bit more pushback. And it's a bit weird when the least dogmatic people seem to be the bros, because it used to be the
Right.
opposite, right?
Exactly. I know,
A lot of the
right?
bros were like, nope, tilapia, you gotta thin the skin, like that's the only way. And so it seems almost like there's just as much, if not more, dogmatism
Oh yeah.
in
More for
science-based
sure.
science.
More for sure now. Because there's like holier than thou kind of thing with it too. Like, I'm smarter, you're just juiced to the gills. There's not a lot of like I guess I mean I don't like the way he works out that much, but I'm thinking about enhanced science-based guys. You got like Janicki, right? Was he considered science-based? I mean, I know he uses like real big range of motion. There's not a lot of enhanced guys that fall into that category, right? Like that are jacked at least.
There's kind of like this dichotomy of natural science-based guy, jacked, bro, enhanced guy, and there's kind of some overlap a little bit, right? Like you see some cross pollination, I guess you could say. Like you do see some enhanced science-based guys and some of the opposite. And so, but yeah, in general, there is, I'm a natural bro guy, I guess. Although again, I do keep up. I do think that you can benefit from both, right? Like I
Yeah.
see some sciencey guys who I'm like, you need to get some more bro in you. Like you need to shut that shit down. I have it with clients where they keep sending me studies. I'm like, okay, I've seen your sets, bro. Like you have more stuff to worry
Do
about
you
than
get the
like
words
worrying.
like the fatigue acclimation and the maximum motor unit recruitment? Like I get these guys asking me this. I'm like, those are things I've never thought about, bro. Like once in my life. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so, but you see some bro guys where maybe, yeah, maybe they could crack open. Actually, Dave Tate, he was one of the first subscribers to Mass, the research review, and like he's on the bro side for sure, but he subscribed to his
Yeah.
science review because he figured, hey, there's going to be something in here. Like there's got to be
Yeah.
some interesting tidbits or at least something to get me thinking.
And he's
And
talked to so many
so
smart people too that know their shit.
exactly like he's talked to I mean so many people have been on Table Talk, and so it's just he's hungry for information, and so I do think you need that. Um, and you do see some bros who are just like, nah, shut up and squat. Well, okay, maybe we could do some other stuff too. Like there's more movements than just that. And so, yeah, I think you do want at least a little bit of both. But if you go too far in either direction, yeah, it can end pretty poorly.
Yeah, and my position always is go down a rabbit hole, go down the biomechanics rabbit hole. You can go real deep. There's like you kind of mentioned different levers you can pull. At a certain point, getting your better technique is kind of the only lever you can really pull. I mean, you're not going to be able to use any more intensity. You can get everything, all your ducks in a row as far as your diet and recovery, but you can usually improve your technique. And a lot of people they just don't know what they don't know. And it's
Yeah.
really a different world when you really start connecting with muscles. I know you've been a little bit more on the mind muscle connection lately, but I'm almost to the point now where it's like if I can't feel a muscle, something's wrong, and it doesn't. It's not surprising that like my quads, my outer quads, like were the hardest thing to feel forever, and those are like my probably weakest area. I don't have like a weak area, but I also connect everything good. And I think a lot of people, like we talked about before, they kind of discount the mind muscle connection and how that can really drive tension.
Yeah, no, I think and I was in that camp for a while where I thought, okay, maybe if you're doing like an activation exercise, you'll feel it. But I think you can get to the point where, yeah, you'll feel it even on your heavy sets, your working sets. And to quote Arnold, it feels different. It feels fantastic. And it is different. And you can feel that it's different. Like you can feel, oh, I did this set of Bulgarian split squats and I shifted my foot position slightly, or I moved my foot in or out or something. And you can tell that it did something a little bit different, right? And so, yeah, maybe on average, if you take 50 people or something, which is pretty high for an exercise science, usually it's like 10, but or 15 or 20, but across a whole bunch of people, yeah, it might average out to not mattering in terms of technique, but for an individual, like, yeah, it definitely matters, especially for your weak points, I think. Like for your
Yeah,
strong points, like they'll be fine, right? For me, my triceps, I don't need to do that much for them, even if I really wanted to, like just maintain them. Um, but even bigger would be cool, right? And so, but I think it matters most for weaknesses, and I think it matters most for areas that are adjacent to your strong points.
yeah,
So if someone has just massive front delts, their chest is going to need some precision, right? In terms of like how they activate it because they're probably just up here, right? They're probably super elevated and like compacted and doing this kind of shit. It's possible to get like almost no chest
Yeah.
and do better. Like, I mean, I've seen people bench press where they're just like out like this and just, I mean, you can see it. You don't even need to be in their body and feel it or like
I'm thinking of
palpate them.
Milo. That looked like Milo's press to me in my
Oh
head.
yeah, he was sort of flared and like out.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see it, like, but you can see someone else press, and you can literally see the chest.
Uh,
There we go. There we go. You can see it contract and elevate based on how you move. And I don't think it's. I mean, I used to think that it was like, oh, maybe it's like 10% more gains or like 10% more growth. No, it's like 0 or 100.
yeah.
It's night and day. Like, if you move in a certain way, you could literally get no growth in an area, right? Like I can do pull downs and get nothing for lats, like literally no growth if I move the way I want it to move. And some people say, oh, like, no, there must be some growth. Well, no, I'm already advanced and no, literally nothing would happen, right? Because it's not like a study where you get the averages, oh, group one, group two, group three, especially when you're advanced, unless you are doing things really well, you just won't grow. Like just
Yeah.
nothing will happen, just nothing at all. And beginners don't understand this because they're going to grow fairly well just because they're so sensitive to the training. But if you're advanced, it's possible to just not grow an area whatsoever. I mean, I do it all the time, right? I mean, it's kind of like the default for an advanced natural lifter in particular, where you just
Right.
like any advanced natural lifter can point to any part of their physique and tell you how they grew it. Like the technique,
Yeah.
the sets, the reps, the exercise, like they can say, oh yeah, when I started moving like this and like actually contracting the chest and then my chest grew, or I started growing my quads when I was more upright in the squat or something like that. Like any advanced natural or enhanced, I mean, ad advanced enhanced lifters will be bigger, but just the definition of advanced, it kind of means you know what you're doing, right? Because you wouldn't be advanced otherwise, right?
Yeah, as I've gotten older, I've put more into mind muscle and soreness as well because it's like a lot of what I do, the repositioning stuff, like I need you to feel like a very specific muscles, not even like a full muscle, but like a portion of a muscle. Like I'll do a move where you have to feel your ischiocondylar adductor, like that's like the posterior upper part of that adductor. I need that very specific one to fire to reposition the pelvis. So it's like you can't say mind muscle doesn't mean anything when if you don't feel that, it's not changing anything at all. And I do think like I've gotten a lot sore over the last couple years. I've always connected my pecs, and those have always been a strong part. But now it's like I get sore off of everything for like a day or two. You can always get lengthened stuff sore, right? It's always easy to get your hamstrings sore or your calves and things like that. But to
Yeah.
feel like your lateral delts and your quads and stuff every single time, I think that is like having a big impact on my
Yeah.
physique. And also it's preventing injuries and stuff when you can put all that tension there.
Yeah.
So
And I think soreness, when I get someone who I might ask them, okay, like what has gotten your chest sore? And I don't think it's everything, but I think it's just a proxy, right? And they say, oh, I've never gotten a sore chest. Like, okay, well, there's something going on there, right?
yeah,
And again, like you can do a whole bunch of dumbbell flies and like you can get sore through that kind of stuff. But I think that's maybe a different type of soreness
yeah.
that is maybe not quite as productive. I mean, that sounds super bro sciencey, but
It doesn't feel as Domsy to me,
like
if that makes sense, like as deep in
yeah,
it.
it's
I
like
don't know how to
you
describe
got
it.
beaten up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's like you're crunchy or just like you feel it is different getting sore from like a mid-range movement versus like you'll get sore in different a different part of the muscle.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I do a whole bunch of dumbbell flies, like really lengthened, I'll get sore like out almost near the front
Yeah, more
delt,
distal. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, 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 for sure. And I think there's something to that regional hypertrophy.
Hmm.
Um, the research actually is starting to confirm this,
They've done it in animals
where,
and
you know, if
mice,
you,
I think. That's
oh
something
yeah,
they've.
with yeah, yeah, there was quail. They had
Was that what it was?
they weighted them down.
Oh, the
Yeah,
wings. Yeah, I
with
remember
these
that one.
the
I'm talking about something else. But yeah, the I did
yeah, that
the
was a
stretch.
wild study.
Yeah, that's when people bodybuilders just start doing some wild shit. I remember that.
Yeah, I think that's why Dante
Yeah.
Trudel with dog crap training and all the stretches
Yeah,
after. So,
I think those were
I
really
mean,
good, but I think they
people
fucked
are
some
like,
people up
stretch is
too.
new. Probably. Yeah. I mean, especially because I think a lot of enhanced guys did dog crap training. And so, yeah, if they're getting super strong super quickly and then doing a whole bunch of stretching, that could probably not end well for some of them. But yeah, when people are like, "Oh, the stretch is like this new thing," well, it's not new, and it's that hype train, right? There's this new concept fueled by a study, and it's like people run with it, and then 6 months later, no one is doing it anymore, right? And I mean, I tried it myself. Lengthen partials, it didn't feel bad, right? Like it was a nice change of pace, doing everything lengthened, like my chest work, my one arm pull downs, my curls, my extensions, everything. It definitely taught me something about each movement because when I reintegrated it to the normal movement, it was, it felt different. It felt like I was moving, differently and in some ways better, in some ways maybe not as well. Um, if someone does only lengthen partials for years and years, I think you're probably going to lose something and just not be able to contract or not be strong in that contracted position. And I think orthopedically, it's probably a good idea to be fairly strong, both at a stretch and a contraction and everywhere in between. Um, so yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend doing only lengthen work, even if a study says it might be either okay or better. Because that's the narrative now, right? It's, oh, you can do half the rep and still get the same gains. Like they're kind of walking it back gradually.
Yeah,
Like it used to be way better. Now it's a little bit better.
yeah.
Oh, now it's
That was
like
no
the
different.
same, but you only have to do half the rep. And it's like, well, you only get to do half the rep.
Yeah,
I like doing the full rep. Like, I
exactly.
mean, I enjoy not just like doing these little.
Yeah,
So I think a lot of this is catered to beginners where they're just easy to sell the easy way out. Although also, I mean, the volume is kind of the opposite though. Maybe it's the easy way out in terms of like you're
effort.
sandbagging in sets and
Yeah.
you're there for like 3 hours and
I
you
think a
only
lot of
do
people would
any.
rather do that. A lot of people don't want to like dive into
It's
that
not,
that
I
shit
think
that it
some people
takes.
can't. I think
Yeah,
some people can't. Like it's just not in them. And
yeah,
so they kind of have to do more sets to get the same result or a worse result in a lot of
yeah.
cases. Um, but I really do think that effort is a skill and you can get better at it.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's still something that I'm working on, right? Every set where I'm focusing beforehand and it's important to me and it matters. And you got to commit to your sets. Like it's not easy sometimes. In fact, it's if it's ever easy, you messed up. So it's always going to be difficult. Um, but I think there's a lot of improvement both for technique, but then also that skill of pushing yourself. And once you have both of those,
yeah,
yeah, you look at the volumes you used to do and just you kind of wonder
yeah,
like, okay, well, maybe I should have pulled the other levers first at some point. And so yeah, it's kind of come full circle, and I would say most people shouldn't become that guy. Like, don't become the volume guy because then like you identify with being the volume guy, either high or low, right? If
yeah,
like someone's a low, like I can only do one set, well, like maybe a second set could be beneficial in some cases, right? And so, yeah, don't. I would say my advice to most people would be moderation is often where the most gains are going to be found, but it's not as marketable, and so you're not going to hear a lot about moderation, even if that's what a lot of these guys are doing who are on social media posting rage bait content talking about, oh, this study said this. If you look at their training, so it's like, oh, are you doing 50 cents a week? They're like, well, no, no. Oh, well, why not? It's better. Well, and then you kind of like pick apart, well, why are you not doing the thing you're posting? And it's just because it's impractical or the study was on people. who don't know how to push themselves, or the
Yeah.
technique was off. Like there's something in there where most seasoned lifters can see it and just think, okay, well, this is ridiculous. And again, that's part of the reason why it was posted in the first place, because of that pushback. And so, yeah, hopefully things can get. Damn, your arm's looking jacked.
It's
Um,
fuck you. Didn't you just measure
distracting.
19? Didn't you just measure 19? Like, is that fucking real?
It I think 18 and 3/4. The
You
19,
got an
I think,
inch on me,
a little
bro.
bit.
Yeah.
The 19 was a little bit askew, I think,
Yeah. That's
and slightly pumped. Uh, I can't claim 19 yet.
but yeah, you still got an inch on me. I was like 17 and 3/4. So they're coming up.
You're leaner than me though. Like that's
I know,
the
I fucking
19
get
was like
fat.
a it was a bloat. It was I think it was 100. I think it was 235-ish pounds.
Oh yeah.
So it's yeah, for me that's like that was
I'll
a
I'll do that if that's what it takes to get one measurement bigger than yours once. So let's dive into some more training talk before our friend jumps on. So other than falling into the volume trap, what are some common mistakes you think intermediate or even more advanced lifters make?
I would say in some ways consuming too much social media content, because some of it is helpful, but I almost think that having that experience in the gym of yourself going in and just having no information, like
And
just
experimenting
no,
yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
like you have to actually, oh, like I have a piece of meat here. What do I do? Oh, do I do this? Oh, no, that I feel that over here. I don't feel anything here. Oh, what about this? Oh, ooh, that feels nice. Like that feels good. And so I think a lot of lifters, especially younger guys and girls, it's just this inundation of information. Just I mean, you're scrolling and like, oh, new study, new technique. Oh, jacked guy. Oh, he's shredded. Oh, this variation, this program, like this, and it's everyone's trying to sell you something as well, and so everything's overhyped, and social media just selects for the most extreme content. Oh, the high volume, the low volume. Why are there no like moderate volume
Right.
gurus, right? Who are just like,
Right.
yeah. 2 to 3 sets is probably pretty good. Maybe one, maybe 4 or 5, but
It
don't
all
do
works.
crazy amount. Yeah, like there's his keep people scroll past that. She's like, this
Yeah.
is oh, just one set every 4 weeks. Like that's I'm gonna try that program. It speaks to people, right? It speaks to their laziness or their obsessiveness somewhere. But people who are neither lazy nor obsessive and are kind of in the middle, they're really hard to sell stuff to, right? Because they're smart. And
Right?
so most people, especially the ones who want to make tons and tons of money, you gotta set up some kind of package, some kind of marketing, and it has to be catchy and there's an acronym involved or some shit. And
Yeah.
so so many acronyms. The fitness industry, we love our acronyms. And so yeah, moderation, I would say, is a pretty good starting point. And you might find you need a little bit more, a little bit less. You might find you have certain pet movements. Every advanced lifter I've talked to has pet movements,
Yeah.
and they're almost always different for every person, right? Like, oh, I love this exercise for my lats. I love this for my rear delts. And everyone has a little bit of a different style of doing something. And so, yeah, you can have some general tips and strategies, but at the end of the day, no one can work out for you, right? Like time spent on social media could be useful, or it could be a waste of time, or it could be counterproductive in a lot of cases. And so, but either way, at the end of the day, your muscle doesn't know that you read a study or you spent an hour on TikTok or whatever. Like it has no idea. It doesn't give a shit. It has no clue about all that information you're consuming. It has no idea. Now that information might help you to stimulate it more effectively or less effectively in a lot of cases. Um, but lifting weights is there is that mind muscle connection, but people have forgotten about the muscle. The mind connection is just it's just not working as well as it could. And
I gotta throw
so,
Atlas quote one more time where he talked about Milo. He says, some guys just want to be the smartest in the gym instead of the biggest. I don't really get it.
I mean, I obviously I've had my differences with Milo, and I still think his video was on protein was not the best. I thought my response could have been better, although I thought it was overall pretty spot on. Um, I forget how old he is, but he's natural. I do think he's natural, and he's competed, which means he got shredded once at least, which can take time away from building. Um, and I think he's in his early 20s, I want to say.
Really?
And it just takes
No.
time to build
Early
a natural.
20s?
I
Does he
think
have
he's
a
early
PhD?
20s, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, he has a magnificent beard, so he looks a little bit older, maybe. But see, like we can have differences and then praise each other's beards. Like, come on, like it's not that serious. Um,
Hey, and he makes fun of Paul Carter, so that's hilarious.
oh, that's I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Paul is blocked, so
I know.
I can't see his content. He's probably the most block happy
Oh yeah,
person
for
ever.
sure.
Not even in the answers ever.
Yeah.
You ask me a question, goodbye. No. But I think Milo has I think he has a good physique. I think he has great quads. Um, I think his arms could use some work compared to his quads, but people have to realize it takes time, right? Like even if you're in the oh, he's also working his ass off, right? He's producing a lot of content. And I've been there where in 2020 I was working like 80, 90 hours a week,
Oh wow.
and it is draining to the point where it is sometimes hard to get in a good session, right?
Yeah.
And so I think he's in that position probably right now. I don't know how many hours he works a week, obviously, but it's more than me for sure. I'm a lazy sack of shit recently. But it's the standards we've gotten to are a little bit ridiculous, I think, for natural lifters. Um, and I mean that genuinely because 5 years ago I was seeing the same comments. 4 years ago, I guess, when I got in that argument with Greg Doucette, there were so many comments were like, well, I think I'll listen to Greg rather than you. Look at you. I'm just like, what the fuck? Like but I'm right. I'm correct. Yeah, but look at you and look at him. He's shredded. And I'm like, well, yeah, but
Been working out
he's
for
a
25
he's
years on
lifting.
gear.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so it's um, I can relate to the situation of people critiquing your physique without realizing that you're not done yet. Like his physique is going to look better in 5 years, I I imagine. Like he's going to make progress, lengthen or not. I have no doubt he's going to make progress. And so, yeah, like you don't judge a sculptor based on them halfway through or a third of the way through or less, right? It's just not that would be ridiculous, right? And so, yeah, I disagree with Milo on a lot of stuff. And I think his really aggressive approach to social media is not good. Um, but I also will defend his physique, and I've seen comments on my videos, talking shit about his physique. He probably looks better than the people posting that, right? Because on the internet, everyone is 28 FFMI, right? So
Well, I've
yeah,
talked shit about his physique, but I was mainly talking about his chest. That was what I was referring to. And his chest is dog
I
shit.
think he's still learning. I'm still learning, right? Like I think
Yeah,
it's
well, I
just
don't think he's learning. I don't think he wants to learn. I think he has it in his brain a certain way things are going to be. You know what I mean?
again, I don't know exactly how old he is, and I don't want to pull the like we're the old guy. Like I don't,
Right.
that's not what I'm saying. But like it takes time to figure stuff out, right? This is where sometimes pride is the enemy and ego is the enemy. And this is almost where being on social media is a little bit of a bitch because you put your information out there and your thoughts out there, and then everyone knows what you think, and it's really hard to change your opinion, especially if it's your thing,
That
right?
gains so
Like,
much more respect when they do that, though. You see it all the time. Like when people are like,
well,
"Oh,
it's
now,
just
now I'll
hard to
listen to
say
you
that you're
more."
wrong. It's just hard to say that they were wrong. Like, no one likes saying that they're wrong. Like, I don't like it. I don't like being wrong. You know, like it sucks every time I have to do it, which is why I'm a lot more conservative with my recommendations and my language because I hate being wrong,
Yeah.
right? If everyone was like me, there would be a lot less wild claims and marketing. But some people, they don't care about being wrong. And when they are wrong, they double down or call the people calling them out bullies and, oh, you no, it's just, it's so, yeah, I hope he changes his opinion gradually because that is the spirit of science, right? It's
Yeah.
gradually trying to get closer to the truth.
They have
Yeah,
no
yeah,
attachment
like
without the
exactly,
science.
exactly. Like you can't be that guy, right? Like I've been careful in my own sort of on my own channel not to be that guy, like not to be the volume guy, not to be the effort guy, not to be well, kind of the triceps guy, but like I don't want to be any guy, right? Because what happens if what happens if I rip my triceps tomorrow, right? Like if I rip the attachment, so to speak. I mean, you feel like a piece of you is missing, and it would be missing and be
Yeah.
flying off across the gym. That thing's like a rubber band. That'd probably kill someone. But
You would have to like measure it wherever it balls up, and that could be like your new arm measurement. It'll be like 21
there we
inches.
go. There we go. Yeah, that's a new arm size protocol. Ripping your biceps and triceps. Actually, I got a synthol accusation recently.
I saw.
Uh,
Yeah. That's pretty good. I mean, like that's above enhanced. It's like like usually it's just these freaky bodybuilders that get accused of synthol. I haven't heard many natty guys being accused of that.
yeah, I mean it's I mean it wasn't from a very intelligent source, put it that way. Um, but you can usually see, right? Because it's kind of blurry, right? Like
Yeah.
I haven't been to actually I've never been to a bodybuilding show. So maybe it looks different in person, but it's like someone will be shredded, but then their rear delts will look lumpy and
Yeah.
smooth.
Yeah. If they
Um,
do it in the side delts, you lose the striations usually.
yeah, whereas when I was shredded, you could see, I mean, you could see everything. And
But your
so
long head doesn't really get striated. You're probably just putting it right in there.
just shooting up in the
I didn't
bathroom.
even know how any of that shit works. I don't even know like how you do it, where you put it, like at all. That's something I would never even consider at all.
Yeah, no, to me, that's just the wildest. I mean, even if you're competing, I don't know if it looks better. In fact, I think it kind of looks worse. And yeah, no, if you're someone who's doing synthol, like I can understand steroids and gear. Like I get it. I understand the appeal, at least as like an outside observer, right?
Yeah.
I don't understand synthol. I just when you see these there's some Russian guy who's just like the most ridiculous, just like saggy
You're right.
bald.
I
It's
mean,
just
if these were women,
awful.
they would have the duck lips and they would be walking around looking like cats and shit.
There's some psychological, obsessive, pathological,
Yeah.
neurotic, one of those words. Something's wrong with them, basically,
Yeah.
where, yeah, yeah, you see women where it's like half their body is fake titty, and you're just like,
Yeah.
what is, that's it, because no one finds it attractive. And so they're not doing it for other people, maybe for attention, or maybe as a kid they saw someone with big arms and they didn't like the feeling of lifting weights. And so, yeah, there's something really weird going on
That's so weird.
with people like that. Yeah.
So, like, let's see this one. Oh, fuck, this is a long one. Let's see if we can get through this quick. I think we can probably knock this out actually pretty fast, right? We got a question for what are your favorite cues for each body part? We don't have to go through each body part, but in general, I'll just say my favorite cues for overall would be that are really overlooked is keep your head like where it should be, just a little bit in the horizon. for the most part, there are times where we want to orient and do certain things to help direct tension, but in general, if you're doing like a bilateral movement where you need to be stable, you usually want that. The foot
Yeah.
contacts, really big. The inner heel, inner under the big toe, that first med head, really big to make sure that you're driving internal rotation. The hand contacts, I've talked about the outer palm and the area between the index finger and the thumb, really big. And then the ribs. The ribs are usually the biggest cue. You'll hear me saying this, just make sure those don't get too crazy. But when it comes to individual body parts, what are your favorite cues for each or for a couple body parts? I can go through them all.
Yeah, it's a lot. I would say, I guess we'll start at the bottom. Calves, okay. Quads, and so I don't really train calves very much. Basically, don't tear it, I guess. That would be the best cue. Um, Quads, I would say I try to keep the hips out of it. So I try to stay upright.
So
So
knee bend
not like,
first and then the hips.
yeah, not hingy, not like hip driving, hip drive your squats.
Yeah.
Um, and you can kind of tell if someone's like, I have a 500-pound squat, and then they front squat like 200 pounds or
Yeah.
something. You're just like, okay, well, that's going to be an ugly looking back squat. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you're right. Like it's low bar
Yeah, it's
and
super
the
hinged.
bottom position, they're basically horizontal. And
Stand
so,
up
yeah, I would
reading.
say if you want quad development, keep it in the quads. Kind of trite, but it makes
And
sense.
those
On a
foot
half
contacts
squat
will
or
help that.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, squat shoes. Yeah.
Oh, like
Fantastic.
I like squat shoes. Yes, there was actually a question about squat shoes or versus wedges, and I mean, there's really not that big of a difference at all. It depends on how high of a wedge you're using.
I've never used a wedge. I mean, I've stood with my heels on plates in like running shoes. I didn't get squat shoes until like 7 or 8 years into lifting. And so yeah, those are well recommended. I mean, just being able to unrack your squat and not have to aim for a couple of plates is is nice.
Yeah.
More stable as well. And then I've never used a wedge, but I imagine they're pretty darn similar.
The only thing I like about
Um,
the wedge versus the squash shoes is I can wear pretty minimal shoes on a wedge, and I can feel my
yeah.
foot contacts a little easier, and that driving IR versus the squash shoes, it kind of keeps me a little more almost ER, or it's harder for me to feel that. But I do them both. I do like the wedge with the minimal shoes. That's my absolute favorite.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to play around with that because yeah, I would say some stuff like this, it sounds like minor stuff, but again, when you're advanced, like that's the difference between 0%
Yeah,
growth and growing, right? So when people are like, how much more growth will I see? Well, if you're not growing, doing it a certain way, it might be 100%. Like it might be
yeah,
no growth or actually growing, maybe slowly, maybe more quickly, but yeah, so some of those like foot cues, I think, but I think probably the biggest overarching one for quads is yeah, just keeping the hips out of
yeah,
it and staying upright. And you might have to like feel like you're fighting your body in
yeah,
some ways. I mean, I've seen even people on their front squats, the hips are really coming into
yeah.
play, or like they're rounding forward and stuff. And so you might have to take a lot of weight off the bar for quad movements. I think that's often like a Platt style upright high bar squat compared to how someone is currently doing something. I mean, you might have to take 30 or 40% weight
Oh,
off the
yeah.
bar sometimes, like 50,
And then you
a
might need to
lot.
use that wedge or that squat shoe to stay upright, like you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and then that and keeping knees healthy, usually it's like a tempo thing and not dive bombing and controlling and maybe not getting excessive ranges of motion with a ton of speed.
Yeah.
Um, Hamstrings, this depends on the movement quite a lot. I would say RDL, trying to keep the erectors out of it, which is something that I almost don't even bother doing anymore because like I don't mind having the erector stimulus as well. But if someone only wanted hamstrings, like really keeping it in the hips this time and not rounding forward, not allowing everything to because you can do RDLs with a hell of a lot of erector. If you allow like the shoulders to droop forward, you can even get quite a lot of traps,
Yeah.
like mid traps and rhomboid and stuff where and you can kind of see what someone is working, right? If everything is locked in and chest fairly upright and the hips are being pushed back and they're keeping the lower back tight, like that's going to be quite a lot of hamstrings, I'd say, and adductors and glutes. But then I see someone else where their shoulders are forward, and then looks almost like they're doing a Jefferson curl with a
Yeah.
little bit of hips involved.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't say it's riskier. It's just working a different area. Um, Glutes, I find that your pelvic tilt is a lot more important for glutes rather than hamstrings. I mean, some people will say stuff like, "Oh, hamstrings, adductors, and glutes, like they all extend the hip." It's like, yeah, that's technically true, but like at the top of the hip thrust, when you're really trying to,
Yeah.
go for maximum depth, so to speak, when you're really trying to get up there, um, you'll feel a lot more glute in that top
Yeah.
position,
Yeah.
right?
The short
And
range is
trying to
mostly
get,
glutes. Yeah.
yeah, like almost entirely glutes. And so I find that, again, taking a little bit of weight off the bar, because you see some people do their hip thrusts and it's like lower back and like
Dude, these
almost
girls trying to build
quads.
these fat asses, I just see them creating so much compressive force, and they're all fucked up. I've trained so many like smoking hot chicks that have good bodies, but they're in so much pain. Their back and necks are all fucked up.
Yeah. And so, yeah, often it's an ego thing. Um, it's sometimes you have to take weight off the bar, and that doesn't mean you're going to go backwards. I almost blame progressive overload in some
Yeah,
ways because people think, oh, I need to add weight, and then a year or two later, like yeah, they're stronger on paper, but they're moving in a way that is
yeah,
not actually all that productive. Um, let's see, lats. I find one arm work is very productive for me
yeah,
personally. I have a really hard time with two arms unless it's a pretty darn narrow grip.
yeah.
Like the minute I go out wide, whether it's a row or whether it's a pull down,
What if you go
it's some
underhand? Do you get pretty
triceps,
good if you go underhand,
um,
or does your biceps just take it?
biceps, or like I don't quite have the mobility because my yeah like getting all the way under is eventually shit starts to get in the way,
Yeah,
right? Like your chest gets in the way or like things sort of tighten up. So I would say neutral-ish or slightly neutral to underhand. I think there's
yeah,
like a bat wing attachment or
yeah. There's a
something
couple.
where
Yeah,
it's
the
sort of
prime have those
there.
adjustments too. Yeah,
Yeah, but I find that if I go even like shoulder width, it's not as good for me. I might get more teres, but for the
yeah.
lats, it just takes it out of it. And so I
Are you
find
like turning? You probably
shoulder
need to get
width
like a little side bend in there almost for you to get that full stretch.
that helps. It's something I've tried where you're sitting a little bit off center and using like a hammer strength or
Yeah, just kind
something.
of lean into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've also experimented with like overhead
Oh,
work, working more like Terry's. I
yeah.
call them Terry's tugs.
Are those like the
And
pullover things, like
sort
on a
of,
bench?
no, I think Atlas did those. I haven't experimented
Yeah, I
with
saw
those.
Range of Strength do those. I have him coming on. I saw him doing
Okay.
those. I thought that's what you're talking about.
I haven't tried those. It was with a cable, and
Oh,
the
okay.
cable
That's
is
probably
kind of
better.
going from, yeah, the cable's going overhead, so it's kind of pulling you.
Yeah.
So I found those are pretty good for Terry's. They're a little bit hard on the shoulder at times. Because if you think about it, if you're doing any kind of movement, like typical movement in the gym, you're never being pulled
Yeah.
into this position. Maybe if you have experience with pullovers a little bit, but that's still a different angle. You're not being pulled into
Yeah.
extension, you're being pulled
Yeah.
into abduction, into adduction, one of those,
Some
where you're
adduction. Yeah.
yeah. And so it's an extreme range of motion and it's forcing you into a position that you haven't really most people haven't ever really
It's
trained in.
getting that
Uh,
scapula to upwardly rotate. That's pretty good. Yeah. It might be good to play around with.
exactly, yeah, like it feels you don't feel in the lat as much, I think, but you feel it up higher in the teres and maybe in the somewhere in the scapula. Yeah. So I've been trying those a little bit. I've had to go pretty light on them. And those have been good. Rear delts. One thing I actually really like are skiers. So where you have two dumbbells and you're kind of leaned forward and then you're sort of driving straight back but you're not tucking at all. So you're not getting lats. You're a little bit flared out,
Are your arms
which is
longer or are they bent?
they're a little bit bent because they will naturally bend a little bit,
But they're
especially
pretty
as you get
long.
tired. Yeah, you start with them long.
Okay,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not quite a row. It
Yeah, I know
looks
what you
almost
mean. Yeah, like,
like
are
a
you how sorry, how close are you by your side? You like 45 or you're right next to your side?
probably between 40, like they're a little bit flared out. Because if you just try to contract your rear delt, you do go out to the side a little bit.
Yeah.
Actually, you get a little bit of side delt even, like right when you go out a little bit. And so I found those are actually pretty good, darn good for rear delts. They're not really like a stretching movement, but I feel yeah, I know. But I feel like just my rear delt's much more in those. Whereas when I do like a typical rear delt raise, for me, I get a lot of traps
Yeah.
when I move in that plane. But if I tuck a little bit, not all the way, because that tends to be a little bit more lats, but just almost 45,
Yeah.
I would say. Somewhere between 45 and 30-ish, somewhere in
Yeah.
there. Um, and I've also been doing similar thing with a chest supported or a cable row where you have two D handles and you're actually that was one of the movements that you assessed. Yeah, that was for rear delts. Triceps probably come into it a little bit. Yeah, especially near the end. But because I'm doing fewer sets, they tend to be beyond failure for rows,
Yeah.
just because like we're just so weak in that retracted position for most rows that I prefer to just keep going personally. So those have been really good for rear delts. Some muscle groups I don't really have to focus on all that much. If people ask me what do I do for my upper traps,
A little bit of
not
everything.
that much, right? Like they insert. I mean, there are pictures of me before I lifted any weights, and like I had traps. Like some people, it's like a sail on a ship. If you have an insertion that's way high up in your neck, you're gonna have more visible traps from the front, right?
Yeah.
And so I just that's genetics, I'm pretty sure. Like yeah, people ask me like, oh, what have you been doing for upper traps? Like rows, kind of like that's about it. Not that much. Um, and so I'd say that's one of the few areas where that was kind of just probably for my mom, I guess. She's pretty jacked.
She's got some meaty traps. Let's finish this. I'm gonna
Yeah,
let our
she,
friend in, but let's finish this topic real quick.
okay.
Um, what else is that it? We got anything for biceps or anything? Hey, how's it going, Elle? We're gonna finish
Yeah.
this topic super fast. You can hop in if you
Oh,
have anything to throw in. So yeah, some of the best cues. Anything else you got, big guy?
Biceps, not a whole lot. I would say mostly avoiding tendonitis,
And
because that's something
what's the trick
that
to that?
just going a little bit more slowly and really controlling the eccentric. And I think especially preacher curls, you have to be just wary about overdoing them. And then if you combine two like heavy stretch-based curls, that's usually a mistake I've found. Like you can combine a preacher and a hammer or an incline
Yeah.
and a reverse grip or something, but yeah, if I tend to go like preacher plus incline, it just doesn't, it's just too much. And so, yeah, mostly avoiding injury with that one. Um, I try to get a variety of hand positions and grips as well. Like that's the main thing, and that's just as much for elbow and wrist health, mostly elbow health, um, than for like any kind of biomechanical reason. Although I do like my hammer curls.
Yeah, Dr. Mike. And the last, I mean, in addition to the ones that I said, I think a couple ones that I give my clients all the time is like you'll hear me say like scrape the ground if you're curling, and I'm just mainly trying to get that shoulder girdle to depress and kind of changes the moment arm a little bit
Yeah,
too, makes it a little harder. Yeah, exactly. Shoulders reach away, right? So we're trying to get that upward rotation instead of
yeah,
more elevation or retraction. I mean, those are kind of the main ones you'll
that's a
hear me
big one
go.
too.
Yeah, awesome. Well,
That
cool.
that's the shoulder one is huge. Yeah,
Yeah, and a lot of people like a lot of people don't do it, but you saw like when I was talking about Dr. Mike, where he'll actually like move the whole shoulder girdle as a unit and like make. I don't see that often. Not a lot of people do that, but that is
it's
another
actually
case where you really
impressive.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, he does have crazy fucking low traps, right? And the rectors and stuff. It's
Yeah.
from that. So yeah, those are probably the best cues I can give. So thanks a lot, man. Sorry, that was pretty long. I was trying.
It was 20
So,
minutes.
so man, there's so much shit I wanted to get into that I wasn't able to, but we've got to finish with some RPG talk real quick. So, um, did you ever get your hands on any of the Baldur's Gate one game of the year? I still haven't played it at all.
Oh, I haven't. I mean, I'm pretty sure that would drop my videos to like once a month.
Uh, and then they got a Dragon Age coming out too now. So you don't
Oh
game at
shit.
all. You're not able to play anything. You know, it'll just your hyper focus will just take over.
Um, yeah, that would be messy. I mean, I might do it. I don't know. Dragon Age, the first two were pretty sick.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so well done. And Baldur's Gate, I played the shit out of those, the one and two. Um, I use this. I don't know if we talked about this last time. There's this mod that makes everything way more difficult in
Yeah,
Baldur's
on
Gate
Baldur's
1.
Gate. Yeah,
Yeah,
all the mods. I had the editor. I had all the mods.
yeah. That's such a that game is held up so well. It was just
The
they
voice
fucking nailed
acting, like everything. Yeah.
the story. Yeah, just the graphics even.
Yeah.
They did
Have you ever watched Vox Machina?
blocks. I've heard of it, but
You haven't
I
seen it?
haven't
You would
watched.
like it. It's kind of my way to get my Dungeons and Dragons fix because I can't play fucking games, dude. I got kids. I got a full-time job. I'm doing this YouTube shit. I'm trying to turn pro. I got no time for anything. But Vox Machina, it's like on Prime. They've got 2 or 3 seasons. It's based off of a game, Critical Role. I wasn't familiar with it,
Okay,
but
yeah,
but
that's a
yeah,
YouTube channel, right?
is it? Yeah, yeah. It started. Yeah, yeah. It started as like shorts and stuff. I think there was a game component. I can't remember, but it's basically like it's an RPG game and a cartoon. It's hilarious. It's super vulgar. You know, it's like a group of ragtag misfits who are really like selfish and shitty, and then they have a little higher purpose and they start trying to slay dragons and shit. You got like a berserker. You've got the little paladin like gnome. You've got the bard and the twin thieves. It's pretty cool. You should definitely check it out. It's funny and it's really well done. It's got
Was
really
it called
great reviews.
Vox
Vox
Machina?
Machina. Yeah, Machina, Vox Machina. It's on Prime. I think they got 2 seasons. It's really good. I definitely recommend
Yeah, I'll
that.
definitely have to check that out because I'm definitely into Dungeons and Dragons. Like I haven't played tabletop that much. There was a group that I used to play with here in Shenzhen 4 or 5 years ago, and yeah, that was a ton of fun. And but I had all the books as like a kid. I had probably 10 of the books, like the Monster Manual and the Player's
Yeah.
Handbook. I didn't even play. I just like read the book and like knew all the rules even though I didn't play, which is like I don't know. I think that's more nerdy if you do that rather than just playing it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Um, yeah, and so I had a whole bunch of those books, and I still play Dungeons and Dragons online sometimes, and so it's I actually haven't seen the Dungeons and Dragons movie. I've
It's
seen
pretty
posts.
good. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was good
I heard it
too.
was good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do
I mean,
anything Dungeons and Dragons I'm gonna watch because like I said, I want to play that shit so bad. I just know I
I
can't.
gotta non-illegally download that later.
Oh, Atlas had a question I forgot to ask. What do you think is more dystopian, China or America?
Oh man. I think China's probably less dystopian than most Americans think,
Yeah.
right? Because I get a lot of questions, or I'll see a comment something like, "Oh, this probably lowered your social credit score." And I'm like, I don't think I have that. And I ask people here about it, and they're like, "Yeah, I don't know if we actually do that." It's like, so I don't know if I don't think it's propaganda, but it's just not used very much, or maybe it's used well because I mean this sounds bad, but I actually think China does some things well. Like I probably hear police sirens like twice a year.
Oh
I
wow.
live in this huge city, 15 or
Yeah.
20 million people. I hear police sirens like just I mean when you do hear them, everyone's like, what is that? There's like almost no crime here. It's I mean there's downsides to it and like there's a lot of cameras everywhere, but I mean if you go to London and to a lot of other Western cities, they have tons of cameras as well. And so like I don't think I've ever seen violent crime or
Oh,
theft
wow.
in person here.
What's the gym like? Is there a lot of girls that work out there? Out here we got these girls with these big fat asses just doing hip thrusts, taking up all the bench presses. Is there like a different attitude there? And do people like yell and shit at the gym? Are they all quiet and reserved? What's the gym
No,
culture
it's
over
it's
there?
it's pretty chill. There's a lot of my gym's pretty good. I would say it's the most sort of hardcore gym in the area. And when I first moved here, I used to train at this outdoor gym. When we moved here, I looked around for like the most legit gym with like the best equipment and the heaviest dumbbells. And you go to a lot of gyms here and they have like 30 kilo, 66 pound dumbbells, and that's the heaviest. And they're like, no one's ever touched those. You're like, what the? Okay, that's weird. In my old gym, they had to get the 40 kilo dumbbells out of
Yeah.
storage.
Yeah,
Because I
you
was
had to go up
complaining,
to
I
the
was like, one day
trainer.
I was like, so do you have anything heavier than this? And like, oh yeah, we have 40s, but no one ever uses them. They're in storage. He got them out, they're like covered in dust and shit. I was like,
Yeah.
really? And so yeah, strength standards are definitely lower. I'm actually kind of curious as maybe that has influenced my levels of strength because I mean, if you bench 2 plates, squat 3 plates, deadlift 4 plates, you're like the man in most
Yeah.
Chinese gyms. Everyone's like, oh, well, what's going on over here?
What
It's
about the
just,
girls? They got the big ass culture over there like we have over
oh,
here. I
you,
don't.
okay, yeah, I missed the ass question. That I did see you're
It's
interested
the
in
important
that.
one.
Is that, well, I saw your recent video. Have you been changing the dosage and now you're,
Yeah, so I'm a little high. I'm like 500 tests right now, so it's just thicker. It's not into the I'm not on trend, so I'm not into the morbidly obese fatties yet.
that part killed me in the video. Um, well, there you see the occasional thickness floating around. Um, as a married man, of course, I would never. I've heard about it, those things. I've never, I've never actually partaken in even glancing at that. No, that's disgusting. No, get it away. But I've heard, some other guys at the gym talk about things going on, and so that does happen. I try not to film any such indecencies in my videos. So sometimes you'll have like chick hip thrusting here, chick squatting. I'm trying to like find out how to film
Yeah.
without capturing anyone because I mean, I guess privacy is not really a thing. Like people wouldn't really give a shit
Yeah.
trying anyway. In fact, they might even like being featured in a
Right.
YouTube video indiscriminately. But I don't know. It's just like a little bit of it happened a few times, and someone like most of the comments would be about that.
Yeah.
Because when I was editing a video, like I'm just focused on either what I'm saying or the B-roll and like what I'm doing, and I didn't even notice like what was going on in the background until the comments started rolling in. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
shit, that's not really what I want. That's a good way to get engagement, but like
It's about to say it's like a slick way to get engagement without.
I've noticed some content creators find like little ways how to drive engagement. Like they will intentionally get someone's name wrong in
Really.
order for people to correct them. Like actually Greg Doucette does this all the time. Like
I know. I heard him do with Trigilli.
he will do this all the time. And maybe it's just to troll people, in which case I
Yeah.
respect that. That's fine. But I think it's partly just to like get people correcting him in the comments
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
send it out. But yeah, little things like that where I almost wouldn't want to be a female content creator because
Yeah.
you kind of have to. I wouldn't say you have to, but I think there's a lot of tough decisions with like how much you put yourself out there physically
Yeah.
versus informationally, and it's whereas guys like it's just not. I was actually some guys do film a lot of stuff from certain angles or like
Tank
you know,
tops.
rear, yeah, or like rear glute spreads, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like you can see like which audience they're catering to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I try to keep things as classy as possible. Yeah.
Do you last question? Do you see you ever moving back to the US? You and your girl, or you China for good now?
I don't know. I've talked to a bunch of people who have done it, and the feedback is sort of mixed, right? Like often the cost of living is cited, where especially some areas. Like I was talking to a couple where they moved back to think it was LA, and
Oh yeah.
just nuts, just
Well,
like
where
crazy.
I'm looking at a three-bedroom apartment right now, and I'm
Yeah.
5,500 is what it'll cost, and that's about as cheap as I can get it.
Yeah. And so, but here in China, housing is still fairly expensive, but rent is super cheap. And like cost like just normal day-to-day shit is cheap, and just I can get stuff delivered here. Like my mouse broke one time and I got a new mouse sent here in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I ordered delivery for a new mouse, and just or like if I forget batteries, like I can get those, like anything you could
Like a little
have.
courier drove it by.
Oh yeah, like just knocked on the door. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just into the community, into the elevator, up the elevator, right to the door, like weirdly fast. Like how did you even get to the and so it's yeah, it's the quality of life here is actually pretty good. Sometimes the internet's a bit annoying.
Way better
Like,
this time. Yeah, last time it was a little delayed. I was surprised. That's cool.
yeah. So the I would say kind of meh internet is like the one big thing, but my wife also hasn't really expressed a ton of interest in going back. Like you do see some local women, and this is not just China, where they try to find an American man or a European
Yeah.
man to go back there with him. I never got that vibe from my wife, and
No.
I think if I did, it would be weird, right? Like it's
Yeah.
because that then you kind of question: Are they with you for you, or are they with you for the
Yeah,
green
that's the
card?
90 Day
I've seen a
Fiance.
number of
My
men
girl watches
where,
that shit all the time. Yeah. The
yeah,
Philippines is
like
a
I've
big
seen a number
one.
of men where that has happened, where they go back and then she ditches him like as soon
Yeah.
as possible, and then yeah, that's a rough
Well,
situation.
maybe you're using her
Uh,
to get into China.
that's I've um actually it's funny. My dad is English, British, and he moved to America and married my mom, who's American. So he got his sort of I don't know if he got his green card or citizenship that path, but like he ended up they still live in the United States. And then my brother did the same thing with Australia, and I did the same thing with China. So
It's just you
we
guys
we
men can't stay where you're from in this family.
yeah, we're traveling men. Yeah.
That's funny. Shit, man. Well, dude, this has been awesome. I appreciate it. Like I said, there's so much that we can always talk about and go over. Everyone really loves when I have you on. Like I said, this was my most popular podcast, and now hopefully I should be a lot better at this shit. So hopefully this is a little bit better this time. Basement was like trying to chase you. He was real close to you. He's got more views, but the watch time's not as high as yours.
Okay. His stuff is great. I really like his content.
Yeah, I love just his voice. Like I could just go to sleep. Not that he's like boring, but he's got such a like a comforting, calming voice. He's put on
I
his like
like
white
his sense of
noise.
humor too. Like
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
a joke he'll make a joke and it's totally deadpan, and then it'll hit me like 2 or 3 seconds
Yeah,
later.
exactly. That's great. Well, man, appreciate it so much. Thanks a lot. Anything else you want to put out there before I let you go?
No, no, this was great, and I'm happy to come back anytime. And hopefully I wasn't too hard on L. Actually, I
No,
think it was
how do you
productive.
feel? That was good. You feel like you
Oh yeah,
guys
that
are
was good. I mean, um, I wasn't expecting like an apology for the study or anything, but I think most important thing is practical recommendations and maybe just food for thought, no pun intended, for the viewer. And
yeah. And I think for
um,
her stuff is so short form too. Like if you probably want to look at
it's
the
tough
nuance,
to
you're gonna have to look at the longer form stuff.
for sure. Yeah, yeah,
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. We'll do it again, dude.
for sure.
All right, have a good one.
You too, man.